Milk. Something all of us grew up with, something most of us were encouraged to drink to grow big and strong. For decades, the image that has been cultivated around milk is a healthy one. Not just the milk industry, but nutrition research institutes across the world encourage the daily consumption of milk and dairy products.
For a scientist, the diversity of the substances present in milk is phenomenal.
But is milk really healthy? The positive image is faltering. For years, there has been a fierce debate between those who are pro-milk and its critics.
Milk, as we know it today, has very little to do with the original foodstuff.
Critics claim that milk can cause civilization diseases such as allergies, diabetes or migraines, even cancer.
Milk is a biological doping system. We are talking about a process that repeatedly pushes us into growth phases. In my view, civilization diseases are illnesses caused by excessive growth.
Those for and against milk accuse each other of setting an aggressive tone. As a result, milk is one of the most disputed products in the food industry.
We are studying, we are observing. I'm not in a war. It is the anti-milk faction that's on the warpath.
Consumers are increasingly uncertain. Whom should one believe? We are on the search for answers. Is milk healthy? Or is milk bad for you? We are on a quest for the truth and visit scientists, doctors and milk producers across Europe. Our journey begins in the northwest of France. We want to see how milk is processed nowadays and what consequences this can hold for its consumers. We visit a dairy plant belonging to the French milk cooperative ARTE. The farmers deliver 40 tankers of milk to the plant. That is 1 million litres every day. The dairy uses it to make cheese, butter and milk powder. President of the ARTE cooperative is Dominique Charget. As a representative of the milk industry, he considers the debate around milk overhyped.
Milk consumption is encouraged by nutritional experts. It's a basic foodstuff and the first thing we consume after we're born. It's recommended by the National Programme for Healthy Nutrition, but as with all foods, it also attracts controversy. Thanks to the high health and safety standards in today's dairy industry, there's never been less risk. But there are still people who say milk is not good. I think back to the example of butter. 10 years ago it was criticized for having too much cholesterol, but today it's recognized as a good food.
In a modern dairy, the milk goes through several processing stages on arrival. The most important are homogenization and pasteurization. Homogenizing is when the fat particles of milk are broken up to prevent it from getting creamy. During pasteurization, the milk is heated for 30 seconds to 72 to 75 degrees Celsius to kill bacteria and increase the milk's shelf life. At ARTE, the pasteurized milk is used amongst other things to make cheese. Despite the industrial scale of production, there is emphasis that milk is still a natural product, traditionally produced, healthy and safe.
We make dairy products like cheese, butter and yogurt the same way we did 40 to 50 years ago. Naturally, with new methods and techniques that are recognized and monitored and are under strict regulation. I think, due to the safety of these controls, milk is an excellent product that you can consume without a problem.
Le lait est un excellent produit que l'on peut consommer sans problème.
Et vous, c'est quoi votre milk moment?
So, there's nothing wrong with milk. Some experts would strongly disagree. We go to the Alps, to Innsbruck in Austria. We want to find out whether the processing that milk undergoes can have an effect on our health. We have an appointment with a specialist for food intolerances and meet Dr. Maximilian Lidochowski in his surgery.
Milk, as we know it today, has very little in common with the original foodstuff. It goes through 20 to 30 processing stages, from heating to storage, cooling, homogenization, pasteurization, separation of the milk bubbles, milk fats, and so on. In the end, the name is the only similarity with the original product.
Amongst Dr. Ledochowski's patients' records, there are many cases of food intolerances. Their roots lie in the processing methods used by the modern food industry.
I always say, a little ill-naturedly, that the diseases which I treat are caused by nutrition scientists or by the research done by theoretical nutrition medics.
This is especially true of modern dairy products. According to Dr. Ledochowski, the cause of many people's symptoms is a reaction to the processing.
Our stomach is used to digesting milk and dairy products in their original form. We haven't had the time to adapt to the new developments implemented by the food industry. That takes many generations.
Has milk become problematic for our digestive system due to its processing as a modern industrial product? What do the official nutrition institutes say? We travel to the north of France, to the Pasteur Institute in Lille, the world's leading centre for fundamental research. It advises the French government and the World Health Organization. Professor Jean-Michel Le Cerf is head of the nutrition department. He is amused by the notion that modern processing can have a negative effect on milk.
It's a funny idea. All food is processed. These procedures can have a negative or a positive effect. All studies on the health effects of milk were carried out with processed milk, UHT milk, homogenized milk, or pasteurized milk. The studies found no negative effects, but positive ones, for whatever reason. Perhaps there are changes that need to be examined, analyzed, perhaps corrected. But overall, there are no noticeable negative effects.
Professor Le Cerf considers milk to be fundamentally healthy, which is why he supports the official French recommendation of consuming 3 milk products a day.
There are 2 reasons why milk is so special. Firstly, it has a unique composition and is one of the most nutritious foodstuffs there is. The other reason, which I think is even more important, is what milk represents. It's the first thing that nourishes the young, and that symbolism gives it a certain strength.
Cette symbolique lui donne une force particulière.
paf 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 le loup? Alors, c'est l'histoire de 3 petits cochons qui mangeaient 3 produits laitiers par jour. Quand tout à coup, le loup!
Les produits laitiers sont nos amis pour la vie.
Also in Germany, the National Association for Nutrition recommends the daily consumption of dairy products, ideally 250 millilitres of skim milk and 2 slices of low-fat cheese. Germany and France are the leading dairy producers in Europe. The milk industry is an important economic factor for both countries. France produces 25 million tonnes of cow's milk a year. Germany, almost 32 million tonnes. Such a large output is only possible through efficient dairy cow breeding and through using high-yield cows and concentrated feed, power feed. We want to know what conventional milk production looks like today and visit a dairy cow farm in northeast Germany. Dairy farmer Philip Kowolik is in charge.
On our farm, there are about 1,000 dairy cows that give milk daily. They're milked 3 times a day, stand in 4 different barns, and are in 6 different groups. One dairy cow produces around 28,000 litres in its lifetime, around 9,500 litres a year on average. Conventionally speaking, we are a little above average. Of course, by maximising the animal's welfare, we aim to increase the cow's productivity. A cow that gives a lot of milk has to be kept healthy. It has to feel comfortable, otherwise it won't produce much milk. They're not agitated. That's how you can see you're doing everything right. They're not nervous, they're not kicking, but standing calmly.
The quality of the milk and its makeup is determined by how the cows are kept, their health, and what they are fed. On this dairy farm, the cows get hay and an energy-rich feed, a power feed, that is made up of corn, grain, and coarse colza meal. Without it, they would not produce as much milk. But aren't cows natural grass eaters?
My opinion is that today's cow needs energy-rich feed. If we put the feed and the hay side by side, the cow would eat the feed first, as it has a certain thirst for energy, and we have to address that. We can't compare this dairy cow with cattle from 2,000 years ago. In my opinion, a high-performance cow that makes a lot of milk is much healthier because it has to be well managed to put out a lot of milk. A cow doesn't produce the milk just like that. It doesn't just fall into the milk tank or the milk bottle. It takes a lot to manage a high-yield cow.
Philip Kowolik does not think this highly efficient way of keeping cows has negative effects on milk. Just the opposite. According to him, overall, the milk quality has improved.
The substances in milk have stayed the same. There's been no change in the last 20 to 30 years. The quality of the milk has improved if we are talking about the cold chain, which is always kept at 4 degrees, and that the milk is rapidly cooled. Then the milk is packed for transport and is brought to the dairy. This supply chain has become very efficient and is constantly controlled. Every cow is examined for its milk quality once a month. There are so many control mechanisms in place that I can certainly vouch the quality of milk is better.
Is that true? Has milk quality improved? We go to Switzerland, to the Paracelsus Clinic in Lustmühle. It is a clinic for holistic medicine with complementary treatments like homeopathy. It functions as a clinic of academic medicine. Dr. Thomas Rau is head doctor of the clinic. He has been critical of dairy products for years, mainly due to the beta-lactoprotein contained in milk that can lead to allergies.
The cow has changed. The cow is fed differently. What the cow eats is important, as the feed influences milk production. The milk has fundamentally changed, at the latest since 1983 shown in studies, but it changed even earlier than that. It has much higher levels of beta-lactoprotein. It is now more protein-rich. It also has lost its omega-3 fatty acids and has far less trace elements. And so nutritious milk has been changed into an industrial foodstuff, and it's just not the same anymore.
If milk, then organic milk, advises Dr. Rau. But what is the difference between organic milk and conventional milk? We visit the Swiss farm Gut Rheinau by the River Rhine, a farm run according to strict organic guidelines. There are only 70 cows here. They still have their horns and their own names. We meet the organic farmer and former farm manager of Gut Rheinau, Martin Ott. Ott has set himself the goal of taking the turbo out of milk production.
You see, 200 years ago, the world champion milk-producing cow was making around 2,000 kilos of milk a year. Today, it's 27,000. That kind of breeding compromises health.
Züchtung geht natürlich nur auf Kosten der Gesundheit.
On the other hand, we have a milk surplus. The milk that isn't needed lowers the prices. The pressure increases and we end up in this familiar spiral. And I made the wonderful discovery. You just have to understand the cow. Understand the cow in its field and give it the direction it needs, the task that it actually wants, and the role that it has always played, and that is eating grass.
Gut Rheinau Farm only has as many cows as the land can nourish, a sustainable cycle including agriculture with no external input. This makes the milk more expensive than conventional milk. It is a countermodel to conventional cattle farming that buys its feed, including corn and palm oil, from the global market.
If you don't change the system and say we have to carry on producing the amount of milk that we have today, then there's no hope for organic. Organic is always a system, and the milk that is produced from grass will always be in limited supply due to cows. If we let this cycle take over again, then we will have less milk and the milk will have a better price. It may be more expensive than Coca-Cola, and then everything will be back in order. And then milk will have its correct role in nutrition again, and not just be a mass product that one can consume industrially in all forms from anywhere. That's my vision.
Organic milk as a sustainable alternative to the globally mass-produced milk? But is organic milk really healthier? We go to the Max Rubner Institute in Karlsruhe, the National German Research Institute for Food and Nutrition. We have an appointment with Professor Bernhard Watzel, head of the Department of Physiology and Biochemistry in Nutrition.
The way we feed the cow affects the makeup of the milk. And that means, due to organic production regulations, we can influence the makeup of the fatty acids, which results in better composition and higher levels of nutrient-rich substances in organic milk. For example, the omega-3 fatty acid, where we find levels that are 50% higher. In the long term, it's certainly an advantage, but even so, it's a moderate advantage.
Milk is healthy, according to the Max Rubner Institute, and organic milk is a little bit healthier. Yet, there are many people whose system cannot tolerate milk. The most common reason is lactose intolerance. In Central Europe, this affects 1 in 7 people. Awareness of lactose intolerance has risen sharply in recent years. More and more people believe they are suffering from it. But what is lactose intolerance? We asked the expert for food intolerances in Innsbruck, Dr. Maximilian Lirochowski.
Lactose intolerance is actually normal, according to the global population, as 75% of people lose the ability to break down milk sugar, lactose, after they are breastfed. If the milk sugar is not broken up, it is fermented by bacteria in the gut, and these fermented products create problems, such as stomachache, diarrhea, bloating, and so on.
According to Dr. Lirochowski, lactose intolerance is on the rise. But he thinks there is another problem.
One factor contributing to the rise in lactose intolerance is the increase in milk consumption, but it is also the amount and the way in which milk is produced. There are so many steps in the processing system that can lead to intolerances that this in turn leads to the increase in intolerance reactions. And this is typically attributed to lactose intolerance. But often, it is a combination of intolerances, not just the milk sugar itself. Previously, we didn't put any thickeners into our dairy products. Nowadays, you can hardly buy yogurt that doesn't contain alginate or carob gum and these things, only so it becomes creamier and has more flavor.
People that have problems due to dairy products do not necessarily have an intolerance to milk. There is a further possibility, the allergic reaction. In the Paracelsus Clinic for Holistic Medicine, Dr. Rao recommends his patients to cut out dairy products. How are the infections? I got one recently, but it cleared up much more quickly. The sore throat was gone within 2 days.
What have you changed in your diet?
I have cut out gluten and milk.
Good. And how is that going?
Yes, it tastes better. You get used to it.
All cow milk protein products, yogurt, cheese, all of the creams and so on, have milk in them. And we consider these as problematic and very allergenic products. Because beta-lactoprotein, the milk protein, causes the most allergic reactions out of all foods, much more than lactose, than gluten and nuts and all that. It looks like the products you're allergic to are milk and gluten. That's doubly annoying. That has destroyed your gut flora and your intestinal mucosa. And this affects your whole immune system.
Diese Menschen haben dann eine leicht höhere Histaminhaltigkeit.
These people have slightly higher levels of histamine in their bodies and react stronger to secondary allergies.
Wir haben die Leiden, die der Kuhmilch.
We have the symptoms of those allergic to cow's milk, the much more rare allergy to gluten. So the celiac also has secondary allergies. is allergic to hay pollen or strawberries or cat hair. Secondary allergies.
An estimated 1% of adults in Central Europe are allergic to cow's milk. In the Paracelsus clinic, this percentage is much higher.
Among my standard checkup patients, those who are just health conscious, we see about 60% with an allergy to the IgG4 lactoprotein. With our autoimmune patients, it is over 80%. Amongst our cancer patients, it's almost 95%. This is an incidental rise of these illnesses. And when I see it in hundreds of patients, for me, that has the authority of a study. I just see it so much.
According to Dr. Rao's findings, dairy products can lead to a chronic weakening of the immune system. The consequence? Increased infections, such as chronic angina or chronic sinusitis.
One litre of milk is made from thousands of cows. These thousands of cows are treated with antibiotics. Their proteins are altered by pasteurization, and you get an immunological mashup. In our region, there are 30,000 cows whose milk is mixed together. That means 30,000 different immunological profiles that are picked up. It's an avalanche of immunological information that rains down on our young children.
Von immunologischer Information, das auf unsere kleinen Kinder niederprasselt.
Le lait, une force de la nature.
For decades, it has been said that especially children should drink a lot of milk. We all grew up with the notion, milk is healthy. Milk makes you big and strong. Milk strengthens bones.
In my childhood, milk was a fundamental part of our nutrition. One didn't have an explanation, it was a tradition.
Research institutes for nutrition like the Pasteur Institute in Lille confirm milk is particularly recommended for children.
Milk is highly nutritious. It contains many high-quality proteins that are very important for growth.
Milk critics, like the specialist for nutrition Dr. Lidochowski, do not consider milk as being good for children and young people, and recommends against it.
A few years ago, I was at a diabetes congress in Leipzig, and the German National Food Study was presented, and it showed that animal proteins, those recommended in the preschool years, had a correlation to adolescent obesity. And I asked, what animal protein? And there was a long pause until it came out that it was milk protein. So, I should say that nowadays it makes no sense for milk to be a fundamental part of the diet for anyone over 5 years of age. What consequences could milk consumption have for children? Widely diverse ones. Children get allergic illnesses, asthma, and even long-term, due to the ongoing irritation of the immune system, autoimmune diseases. Autoimmune illnesses are increasing the most amongst children. Juvenile arthritis, diabetes and various other illnesses which are autoimmune.
Is milk really partly responsible for this? The Max Rubner Institute sees no connection. Quite the opposite.
Scientific data shows that milk consumption has no negative consequences in early and later childhood with regard to weight trends or diabetes. Indeed, it is the case that moderate milk consumption plays a protective role.
Milk as a valuable natural product. It is good for you and makes you beautiful. That's what the adverts sell. And this is not far from the official school of thought, which states, due to its high calcium content, milk is good for bone development in children and protects against osteoporosis in adults.
All the clinical trials in which subjects were given milk or calcium products over a long time frame show that bone density increased. Bones strengthened and their calcium concentration increased.
Et donc toutes les études montrent que les produits laitiers contribuent à la lutte contre l'ostéoporose.
But not on their own. Osteoporosis is a complex disease with various factors. That milk and dairy products are rich in calcium is certain. If we go from the assumption that one needs 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day to keep bones healthy, it means that we should consume a liter of milk a day. That would mean that mammals which no longer have a source of calcium after they were breastfed would develop osteoporosis. Which means that all people who are lactose intolerant should develop osteoporosis. The opposite is true. In countries where lactose intolerance is endemic, osteoporosis is much more rare than in countries where people tolerate lactose. So Germany, Scandinavia, where milk consumption is highest.
Milk consumption is especially high in Sweden, where a study was published 2 years ago that caused an international sensation. It claimed that people who drink a lot of milk do not have a lower, but a higher chance of breaking their bones, and they even die earlier. We travel to Sweden, to the University of Uppsala, and meet the man in charge of the study, the nutrition expert, Professor Carl Michaelsen. He evaluated the data of 100,000 Swedish men and women aged over 40.
Among women, we found a higher risk of fracture, especially hip fracture, the most devastating type of fragility fractures in elderly, and also higher rate of mortality, of death, among high consumers of milk. We saw the same tendency among men, but it was much weaker among men.
Professor Michaelsen attributes this to the damaging effect of galactose, a component of milk sugar. Animals that were given galactose demonstrated an accelerated aging process.
The amount of galactose given to these animals corresponds to the galactose content of 1 to 2 glasses of milk. So it fits nicely with our study results.
So, are dairy products generally harmful? For Professor Michaelsen, it's not quite that simple. His study clearly distinguishes between milk and fermented milk products like yogurt or cheese. They contain less galactose, and here the study yields different results.
We also found that high consumption of cheese, sour milk, and yogurt was associated with a somewhat reduced risk of fracture and death, in contrast to the findings of milk.
Professor Michaelsen does not want to dictate nutrition guidelines for the general population. First, more studies need to be done. But the claim that a lot of milk strengthens bone, for him, has been disputed.
Our study showed that it increases the risk of fragility fractures in elderly. But many other studies show that it doesn't reduce the risk of fracture. And this has been the health claim for many decades from milk-producing companies, that you get strong bones if you consume high amounts of milk. But the evidence for that claim is very weak.
Would it be better for other countries with a high milk consumption to consume less, so bones stay healthier? No, say the nutrition institutes. They stand by their positive verdict on milk. The relatively high milk consumption in Sweden cannot be transposed onto other countries' conditions. And the study also shows too little milk is not good either.
When you look at the study, the women there consume 600 milliliters of milk a day. In France, it's 100 milliliters. Those are two completely different things. You have to ask why the excess of milk products, and it is an excess, is not beneficial. Excess is never a good thing. It's not something I recommend. Another exaggeration which this study shows is that people who consume no milk, for example children that have an intolerance, break their bones 2 to 3 times as often. That is proven here.
2 à 3 fois plus de fractures. Ça, c'est totalement démontré.
The study from Sweden demonstrates that for complex foods like milk, drawing final conclusions is difficult. This raises the question, how far can the results of individual studies be generalized?
That's the core question when you engage with the issue of the health benefits of different foods. What data do we have? Not every study is of the same quality. And now we have clear criteria generated by the scientific community that can be used to assess studies. How significant are the studies? Are they purely observational or interventional? They are all different types of studies that, taken together, can be considered as evidence and allow us scientists to say we have convincing data, probable data, possible data.
Only the sum of the studies, the so-called meta-study, has real significance in the professional field.
Which is why I always warn journalists from relying on one study. One can always find a study that proves their argument or interpretation, but this is not scientifically correct. We need to take all things into consideration, and only that will allow us to objectively assess the data situation.
Doctors that go against the school of thought and discourage milk consumption generally don't rely on nutrition studies. They rely on the therapy experience with their patients, even if this does not have the scientific recognition of studies.
If you ask me whether one really needs scientific studies, I quote the migraine example. There is no study that scientifically or statistically proves that any food has anything to do with migraines. Despite this, my own experience and the experience of other individuals shows that when I eat chocolate, I get a migraine. If I eat this or that, my migraine goes away. But, on the whole, I cannot statistically prove this. So is that knowledge less correct than anything else, even though I know it and can reproduce it?
Milk critics see another problem with the studies. Sometimes the research was not performed independently, or there is a link between the scientific institute and the industry. We travel to the south of France, close to Nîmes. This is where Thierry Souka works, a science journalist and publisher of books that are critical of milk. It is his goal to reveal the connections between food science and the French food industry.
The French recommendation to consume 3 milk products a day is based on nothing. There's no serious scientific basis for it. It just demonstrates the closeness between the French state, the people who make the decisions on nutrition, and the milk industry. I've uncovered this connection in my book, and also the names of the Frenchmen that are responsible. And I've never been sued by anyone. No one has called for me to retract my statements.
Souka is critical of the Pasteur Institute in Lille. According to him, it is not financially independent.
The Pasteur Institute in Lille is in a tenuous financial situation. It's dependent on money from industry, in particular the milk industry.
It is true, the Pasteur Institute is a private, non-profit foundation that is largely financed by private research and consulting commissions. French dairy corporations like Danone and Lactalis make up their clientele.
We receive a small amount of government funding. We are 80% self-financed. It's exactly the same as with other research organizations. In France, research organizations receive financing from multiple sources, from the state and from the private sector. It's the same for everyone.
Tous les services de recherche en France sont comme ça.
Thierry Souka is also critical of Professor Le Cerf. Due to his connections to the milk industry, Professor Le Cerf is a member of an academic body within an organization that researches behavior and food consumption. This organization is a part of the French milk industry's governing body. For Souka, this is a conflict of interest.
What conflict of interest? It's voluntary work. It's a group of researchers, sociologists, psychologists, and nutrition experts that meet to work on theses and organize symposiums. We do it because we're fascinated by our field of work. I really don't see where there's a conflict of interest. Everyone aside from him sees the problem. The entire press considers it a problem. Everyone who's involved with the ethics of it sees a conflict of interest between the researchers and the industry. But when you ask the scientists and researchers who are connected to the pharma or food industry, they don't have a problem with it.
Back to Germany, and to the question whether milk is healthy or not. We visit our last destination, the University of Osnabrück in North Rhine-Westphalia. This is where the dermatologist Professor Bodo Melnick teaches. He has developed a theory about milk that has caused a lot of discussion in professional circles. Professor Melnick recognizes a biochemical signaling system in milk that stimulates growth in the body. According to Melnick, this has grave consequences for one's health.
But we now know that acne starts earlier and earlier. Even 8 to 9-year-olds have acne. And we know now that it lasts longer. We know that 50% of American women have acne into their 20s. So they still have spots until they're 30. Half of them. Milk is a fascinating topic because in 2008, dermatologists received the message from a Harvard epidemiology group that milk consumption was a cause of acne. So I asked myself, how is that possible? How can milk affect the sebaceous gland? It has to come from the inside. That means milk must have some kind of signaling effect. So we have different attributes for milk and have said that it is not a normal foodstuff. We have to understand that milk has the goal of stimulating growth. We have to understand that milk has an overriding importance. It's a biological doping system.
According to Melnick, milk activates 2 growth signals in the body. Amino acids in the milk stimulate the liver to produce the growth hormone IGF-1, and microRNA, the small genetic building blocks, regulate our genes to also stimulate growth.
In puberty, the whole thing is kick-started and we get acne, and probably encourage the undesirable development of other glands. And this goes on until diabetes. If we continue to overstimulate the glands, we get diabetes, obesity, insulin makes the fat cells grow, and finally we get dementia. And a high correlation between milk consumption and Parkinson's already exists, which is also a disease that's on the rise. It's a system that naturally pushes us into these growth phases. And these diseases of modern civilization are, in my view, diseases of excessive growth.
Professor Melnick claims this growth can even increase the risk of cancer. There is a special microRNA present in milk that is also created by cancer cells to speed up growth. They are called microRNA 21 or oncomere 21.
In our pasteurized milk, we take up oncomere 21. Mere 21, the microRNA 21 of the cow, is genetically exactly the same as the microRNA of the human. I consider this to be extremely dangerous. I think that pasteurized milk should be taken out of our food supply chain. I would urge all my patients, if they drink milk, to drink UHT milk. Luckily, the high heat deactivates the process.
Melnick is the only supporter of this theory. The majority of nutrition scientists reject it. One of them is Professor Watzel from the Max Rubner Institute.
I've talked with Mr. Melnick several times. We've had intense discussions and held talks in large professional circles. He has an interesting hypothesis, but he cannot deliver any practical proof. The data from intervention studies and research studies refute him.
This means the majority of studies do not find a correlation between diseases of modern civilization and milk consumption. Only with cancer, the situation is unclear. The risk of prostate cancer can be slightly increased by the consumption of milk, but the risk of colon cancer is reduced by milk consumption. With other cancer types, researchers have found no connection.
So far, there's no general verdict on cancer. You have to make strong distinctions. Prostate cancer is the only example where it's been clinically shown that high milk consumption may have a negative effect.
We have reached the end of our journey. Is milk healthy or unhealthy? The verdicts contradict each other. The studies are inconclusive. Whom should the consumer believe? The scientists that rely on studies, or the doctors that rely on their practical experience?
When you're asking whom to believe, then believe me. Simply because I think I'm right, and my personal experience has shown me that I am right. I may be swimming against the current, but I am a school doctor and not a doctor of alternative medicine. I do not pursue an esoteric agenda, but simply refer to studies that I have done and to my own personal experience.
Personal experience versus scientific study. The majority of nutrition experts paint the critics as ideologically orientated propagandists.
You have to separate nutrition from ideology. You cannot moralize nutrition. That milk is unsuitable for someone is completely normal. That milk is not perfect is completely normal. That the studies are complex and contradictory is normal. We are investigating, we're observing. I'm not waging a war. It's the anti-milk faction that's on the warpath.
The milk industry and its advertising have been trying to keep the image of milk untainted, successfully. Despite its critics, milk has retained a positive image with consumers.
I have a deep respect for the marketing achievements of the dairy industry. They really are experts that have managed to influence the opinion of the people. This is 30 years of brainwashing, so that even today every last person believes that milk is healthy.
The discussion amongst the experts continues. Milk or no milk, the opinions remain divided.
Technically speaking, milk is rich in important nutrients. It's a good source of protein, minerals, and most of all calcium. Scientifically speaking, these are arguments for moderate but regular consumption. We have a vast amount of products in this field, and I think it's an excess. It's an overstimulation over decades, and the effect is not sudden but creeping, which is why it goes unnoticed.
Our journey has shown milk can trigger more problems than most of us realise. Yet, some people benefit from consuming milk. Whether milk can cause illness on a large scale remains disputed. Which experts to believe is ultimately up to each one of us.